And it's a little past, 9:45 and now, but 1:30, so. I know, I'm just joking. I've said there's a tons of humor. Douglas is also joining us. Will you raise your hands? Everybody, do snaps. I love snaps. I think that's so cool. I have given their director, Jessica, permission at any point in time to stand up and say, Douglas County people do not listen to her. We will talk about this next week. So sometimes I say naughty words. Sometimes I make fun of the state. Please don't judge me. For those of you that are getting food, just keep doing what you're doing. We're here today to talk about child echoes, which are also called outcome summary ratings. So for everything we do, there's always two different words, two different acronyms, which makes it super confusing. So we commonly say ECHO, but they're referred at the state and federal level as child outcome summaries. So we're going to get started. There should be some handouts. I did only make 60 copies, but because I'm so popular, I think we have more than 60. So if you need to share with a friend, totally fine. I also emailed them out. So if you guys do have your computer and you like electronic copies, pull that up. Jessica, I did email them to you as well, so you can get them with your team. We will have a CEU certificate ready. We'll send that out also to Douglas County, so you guys will get your CEUs. But in the half that we're together, we're going to try and do a lot in a short amount of time. We're really going to try and understand why, how and why we use echoes. What are they? What's the history behind it? What are the three rating summary statement, or the three areas? We're going to talk through what those different summary statements look like. How they're reflected within the IFSP, and then also gain ideas on how to talk about that with a family in the IFSP meeting. Just to preface a little bit, we're going to kind of do a where are we right now? And I haven't used this before, but it's a survey link. So if you guys go up to this little menti.com/blah, blah, blah, blah. You can do it on. Or I think you can do it on your computer. I'm going to switch real quick. I also think you may be able to, if you guys use this QR code too. Is that better? Oh, yeah. Hannah Soul's giving me a thumbs up, so I know I'm doing something right. So this is a way to take some data, quick survey on where we are with how we feel, what we know about echoes. There should be 7 or 8 statements that walk through it. Did everybody get it to pull up? Yeah. Is it working, Hannah? Okay. So what there are like statements that relate to where you are with echo ratings, both in yourself, how you incorporate it into families, and then about how we're incorporating into team. If you guys could just go through and fill them out from, there's like 5 different ways to submit the survey, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and some things in the middle. This will kind of give us a snapshot of where we think we are. If any of you also listened to Tammy Walleen a couple of years ago do the echo rating, this is her training. I just deleted some slides. I love Walleen, and changed it to me to go with Prue. So, oops, we're recording. Sorry, Tammy. All right, give me a thumbs up if you're done. Maybe you get the prize. live. This is happening live, you guys. Should have had a Facebook Live. This is so awesome. Dana. My face at the window. So really what we're looking at is some interesting, I think, interesting data. Again, it's a snapshot of our group where we are today. Leslie's over there fanning herself, when we're scraping their hands by the dirt. When I'm looking at this, of course, I'm looking, you know, are we at least at neutral and above, right? So when looking at the first statement, how are we planning for the COS? Feeling pretty good as a team, right? That we're looking at that child functioning across different settings, different situations, home, daycare, things like that. Looking pretty good at discussing as a team how they're using their skills in functional ways. Also talking about what skills the child has not mastered yet. Then looking at kind of where are we below. One of those is maybe we don't feel like we're using the full range of functioning for each outcome. Are we inviting the family to share information and reviewing the current functioning as a team? Another would be using the decision tree. Oh, we didn't get to two, you guys. That's some room for improvement there. And then also explaining to families how and why the echoes are incorporated into FSP, what we're doing before we're moving on. So again, just some kind of, just to get a feel of where we are, what we're doing right now. Perfect. So where did echoes come from? Why are we using them? Everything that we do really generates from the federal level. Back in the mid-90s, early 2000s, the federal government realized we did not have a way to show that the data, right, that we're doing in school districts. And if you guys, those of you who are old enough, think about like where were we as a nation right around 2000, 2002 was No Child Left Behind. And that was when we really started seeing educational systems testing at various levels. They need the data. Once the federal government said we need this data, then it became the responsibility of OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, to figure out how to implement that into Part C. We don't like it, but we know right now we are in the day and age where we have to show accountability for the things that we're doing, especially when it comes to government grant money. So again, is there a better way to do it? Probably, but I'm not going to invent it, and I don't think anybody in this room will either. So we talked a little bit in Douglas County, you guys might, but we talked a little bit about like, we get a report card. OSEP gives the state a report card on 14 different, what we call indicators, subjects, basically. The interestingly thing about this report card, we call it an SSP or an APR, is that the federal government says, okay, you have to get 100 on this one. You have to get 100 on this one. You have to get at least a 98 on this one. So it's kind of like a teacher saying to a student, you're in calculus, you've got to get an A in it. So it's backwards a little bit, but they set these targets for us. And for Johnson County, our 14 indicators really overall look good. Some of those indicators have to do with the 45-day timeline. Some of them have to do with the timely transition conference. Some of them have to do with the entry and exit echo ratings. The one where we as a team have been behind for several years now we are not showing enough progress between entry and exit. And that is measured by two things, your initial echo on your initial IFSP and your exit echo. Two data points. That is what goes into that one. So for us, we're at a point as a program where the state and the federal government have said, you guys gotta get your act together. What are you gonna do? And I'm like, we're gonna serve Chipotle and we're gonna talk about it. So that's what we're doing. I don't know how you guys are doing.
Well, I just told the team we're on our way to that, and this is what we're doing to improve.
So They want to be like us when we so they got a D. No, you guys probably got a C. We got like a D. That's what we got on our report card. And everybody knows I love to get A's. I'm gonna be honest, like I'm good with a C, you guys. Like all we don't have to get an A, we just gotta get a C. So that's kind of how OSEP responded. Kansas started collecting echo data back in 2011. I literally remember when we started doing this and we were all like, what is this? There are different forms that states can use. 35 of them use the same 3 that we use, that same form that's built in, that measures social relationships, acquiring knowledge and skills, and taking action to meet needs. Interestingly enough, those of you who come from Part B uses the same exact echo ratings we do. So a question just to pose, what's happening on that Part B end when we're rating kids really high and they're transitioning to Part B? How is Part B going to show progress? If we're exiting our kids and they're all 6s and 7s, doesn't really help our Part B partners. So it's another piece of the puzzle, right? Part B is trying to show the same progress that we are, right? And Part B has some bigger eyes looking at them than Part C, which is why I've lived in Part C all my life. So, what we know about the echo, it's really our way as a team to summarize what the child is doing and how they're functioning in each of the 3 echo areas. And by a team, I mean me and Julie. If me and Julie and the family do the evaluation and Julie takes the child, when we go to daycare and gather information for the evaluation, that's the team. We also need to come back. Obviously, we report what that looks like with our staffing, our quarterly updates, our primary coaching. So the team can be really big if you've got lots of providers, and it can be really small if you've just had a couple of people involved. So team means different things at different points in time. Again, why is this important? The last statement is probably all I needed on here. We need to show the federal government and the state that kids are making progress in early intervention. That wraps and ties into funding. What do they say about the almighty dollar? Rules. What's consistent nationally from state to state to state? There are 7 different rating statements that we use. If you guys have a packet, on your packet, one of your handouts should be the decision tree. This was one that we didn't do very good on with our survey, but the very bottom of your decision tree are the 7 different rating statements. Some states have a point system, so it's 1, 2, 3 to 7. Kansas implemented a statement instead of a number because they thought it would be easier to talk with families about it if it was qualitative instead of quantitative. When we're looking at these statements, when we're thinking about echoes, one thing that's really important to remember is when we're looking at that child's functioning, we're looking at it from their actual age. What do we expect for their actual age? Which means if you have a child who's born prematurely, we do not adjust for prematurity when we're scoring echoes, right? Which is really confusing because we adjust for prematurity when we look at development. So it's like we're talking at both ends of the ear. But again, when you're scoring these qualitative statements, you're really looking at where that child is for their actual age and what do we expect. And that's, I think, sometimes the hardest part is to be able to score an echo rating pretty consistently. You also really have to know what do we expect at 18 months? What do we expect at 6 months? What do we expect at 24 months? And so that's where I think sometimes we can be like, oh, I'm not really sure, where the child falls. At any point in time, raise your hand, ask questions, have questions, time for questions at the end. Yes, Jill.
Are you going to address kids who are auto eligible?
Yes, we have, I have a slide towards like the end where we're talking about kids who are auto eligible, born with Down syndrome, something like that. What does that look like through the scope of their time in Part C? Same question. Did you guys all hear that? Yeah, we'll talk about that. I love what ifs. Stump the chump. So characteristics, thinking about echoes for the whole entire time. We know that, and I'm going to speak to the Johnson County people who've been here since 2011. We were taught that outcome number 1 was social, to do with social. And outcome number 2, acquiring knowledge and skills, has to do with cognitive skills. And number 3, taking action to meet needs is motor and adaptive. That is not correct. Don't do that anymore. What we know is that development happens across domains. So socially, if I'm a little child and I can't walk yet and I want to be picked up, I can't get to my mom, right? So that not only affects my ability to take action to meet needs, but it affects my ability with my social relationship. Maybe I'm crying a little bit more. So we, I think, as a team, and those of us who've been here for a while have also taught those of you who've come in since 2011 to do it the old way. We have to stop doing that. I, in my heart, believe if we make little tiny tweaks, we're gonna meet the determination criteria. We just have to stop looking at it in silo areas. I think that's our biggest issue. Also, functionality, right? It's not isolated skills, but how is that child using those skills throughout their day? We talk about this all of the time. You guys do it in team meetings, the primary coaching, you do it during the RBIs. We're trying to write functional outcomes. You guys do a phenomenal job of this. I very rarely hear any of us, even during our quarterly update, say, the child is pointing. You guys say the child's pointing to mom when they want to be picked up, or the child is giving me a cup when they want more. So you guys do a nice job of taking the skill and you tie it into how that child is using that skill functionally every single day. We need to keep doing that with our ECHO ratings as well. So going back to our silos, right? Think about them again. Think about your 3 areas. The 3 areas are on this pretty sheet. It has the different colors. So if you think about social skills, social emotional skills, what are some ways that communication can be involved with social skills and social relationships? And the answers are on there in the little bubbles. This is not a test.
Really?
Oh my gosh, Megan McConaughey just said relating with caregivers, you guys. She just love it. I love it. So yeah, so look at those little pieces that are involved with that. Think about how, again, how does motor impact this? We know motor skills are integrated. We know that we need to use our motor skills when we're communicating, when we're interacting socially. A child who can't walk to a water table to play next to his friends at daycare, at a playgroup, at preschool, again, that is affecting their social relationships because they can't move. So again, start thinking about how can we embed all of these domains into each one of the outcomes. So we know communication, we know motor, we're going to see those in all 3 of them. Thinking of those examples again, a child's pointing to a juice box to indicate that they want to drink. I see pointing, right? That's taking action to meet needs. Wanting a drink, they're taking action to meet their needs. They're communicating socially. They also understand that juice box is going to help them. So that can be each one of those outcomes, 1, 2, and 3 within there. We talked a little bit, I gave the example of pouring the water at the water table. What if a child can't walk across the room to get a toy or greet their parent? Again, looking at those 3 different outcomes, how is that going to impact each one of those? What are the pieces that are going to make those things hard? Yes, ma'am.
This might be a question for later, but on the outcomes in the database, so I was told only to mark one area. Like, whether it's a family outcome or positive social, is that still right? Or are we checking all of them now?
So those are IFSP outcomes / goals. This is ECHO, the ECHO ratings. That is different.
So even though it's the same categories?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that when we talk about outcomes. Today, we're just talking about echoes because we're not in trouble with IFSP goals. Not in trouble, don't talk about it. It's like Fight Club, right? Again, thinking about the global functioning of the child, rather than the isolated skills divided up into each of those buckets. Again, I think that is probably our biggest catch. I was at a state meeting earlier this week, and Part C and Part B were both there, and we were both talking about this. Part B is also not meeting determinations. a lot of Part C programs are not across the nation. And so again, we think that it's more of a training issue than children not making progress, right? You guys see it every day. You know kids are making progress. One of the things that I know that I often did, and feel free to shake your hand or nod. If a child came in with motor delays, and let's say I evaluated them with Katie, I'm gonna go in and I'm just automatically gonna put 7 and a 7 for outcome 1 and 2, and Angie's gonna put, 4 or 5, or Katie's gonna put a 4 or 5 on that, and then we go on. Same thing with communication, right? We give them like a 4 or 5, maybe a 5 or a 6 if we're not sure how to explain it to the parent on entry, and then at exit, we can't go any higher. Like, we don't have any room to show that there has been significant progress made. So again, we're just kind of removing that piece of it and going back to the whole idea of what is involved with the ratings. Talked a little bit about these already, in terms of the positive social emotional skills. How are they using those for their relationships with their caregivers, their siblings, peers, acquiring and using the knowledge and skills that they do have, and then using the appropriate behaviors to meet their needs. I actually really like how this one is worded versus taking action to meet needs. I like using appropriate behaviors because we know some children need adaptive and assistive technology to communicate. We know children who are deaf and hard of hearing are going to use sign. So that again is an appropriate behavior if they're using sign and not words. So sometimes you have to look at individually what's going on with the child also to really figure out where they are in each of those areas. So what we're gonna do is, you guys should hopefully maybe have like a quick example. There's like 4 examples. They're not very long. Because I think that we can write and write and write and write. But what goes into developing an echo, it's not just what we're reading on a My Child's Story. It's also what you're hearing from the parent. It's what you're observing and what you're seeing, both at home and at daycare. So if I wrote a 1-page example, you guys are still gonna have questions. Well, are they doing this? And what about this? So really what I want you guys to do is I want you just to take a little bit of time with your group. I want you guys to look at example number 1 with Mari. And I want you to talk about what skills and where might you rate Mari, outcome number 1, based on this 1 quick sentence. Mari is 21 months old.
Okay.
Oh.
They're doing pretty good on but you could use language to say. Yeah. Go in and do data. But I think maybe like she's her down. Yeah. So I thought you know yeah maybe I'm gonna be living would be requesting verbally. Like when a lot of
She's definitely getting her message across.
yeah.
Quality.
Like how we do we need to do all 3? Just the first one. It's the first echo. The first echo. Switch to emotion.
Social relationships.
Springs. I would think for education. What it is. You know, you know, like because you get the times from if she's about they say on this lab, right? But then maybe we'll and thinking about that's not really
Thinking about Mari, What are some things that you guys see in that real quick button, that relate to positive emotional social skills?
Initiation.
Initiation of what? Initiation is a skill, what are they initiating?
An interaction with her dad.
And initiating an interaction, exactly, yeah. What else is a social skill that you guys, or we could look at as a social skill? Requesting. Requesting, and how are they requesting? Yeah, so that's that nonverbal requesting, exactly.
Responding to their.
Yep,
Yeah.
perfect, so responding, responding to dad when dad is asking a question, she's giving dad a response.
Sitting like that.
So sitting with dad, having that good caregiver relationship that Megan McConaughey mentioned when she read that off chart. Yeah, so look at all those things in one sentence, right? My child's stories are like 85 pages long. And rightfully so, sometimes. But you guys, again, it all just depends on how you're writing that, what you're observing, what you guys see. So thinking about this right here with Mari, take out your decision tree. Again, Mari's 21 months old. As a group, come up with what statement, and we're gonna use numbers for all intent and purposes. Think about where you would rate Mari with the outline.
Sure.
Because she's not using words, but she's using gesture.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's like omitting, but it's not verbally.
Yeah.
That age, but like trying to think word, instead of just pointing to the add.
Alright, which group wants to share where they
You guys
like
say?
Mari would be?
Kind of got things.
What
we need to
statement
get
she might fall under on your decision tree?
Like, so I would do, but I feel like for the activity, this is pretty good more.
I'm afraid.
Very deep conversation.
Are you still? About a speech.
We're at 6.
Okay, Isabel's table takes 6, which is child has all the skills we would expect at this age. However, there are some concerns or quality or frequency in using that. 6 and 7 are for typically developing children. When you're seeing skills that are typically developing for that age, you're going to rate a child a 6 or a 7. Mari's 21 months old. What are some things that we would expect socially from a 21-month-old? Words. How many words? Give me a vocabulary number. How about
40.
40? Okay. Do we expect a 21-month-old to be putting phrases together?
No.
No, that's early again, which is why I think a 6 is a great statement. Yeah, she's doing some things that we would expect. What else do we expect socially at 21 months?
We were also saying it could be as low as maybe like a 5 or less, because depending on how it looks, we have some children that meet needs just by getting things, sitting in laps and expecting things to happen.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So it could be like no eye contact or something like that.
Mhm. Right, so that's where we get to like insert all of the what ifs, right? Like, we don't know, is Mari making eye contact? We don't know that. So again, there's a lot of missing information, so we're doing the best. And your table can fill in however they want, totally fine. But it could be as low as what about social development, thinking about peers? What would you expect for a 21-month-old with peer development? Parallel fun. Silence up there, there's observing other kids, exactly, yeah. So again, we don't know this, but you know, Jean and I observed Mari and we did see her playing next to some children, so we know she's doing well there. So again, we've kind of got to explore. All right, go to example number 2. We've got Laszlo. Thinking about outcome number 1, positive social emotional skills. Talk through as a group what you see, what you know, maybe what you don't know. And then decide on a rating. We'll come back in like 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh.
Laszlo is,
Too much.
Laszlo is a 28 beaker, this is first week of days, yeah. Laszlo is, how about, let's say, 26 months.
And we're still just on out.
Kind of depends on how it looks, like if he's shoving other kids out lane.
But there's a direction where if you're supposed to be sitting at the table and you look like to the guy and he did that. And in the letter, yeah, it really was. Yeah, but we didn't want it. Yes, please at this positive state. Feels. I know. I'm getting. So then what the work is. That's not.
Depends,
Yeah. Yeah, I could get out. Yeah, it's really fun there to people in a variety of settings. Oh, they can be, they're not. Really still do function. And knowing the field. But someone's put it back, I'm sure, I mean. So it's, I haven't known tenants will be spent all of my. That just if you do running. I like even 26. Yeah. Crash and do that and usually that's something, yeah, or right, that means the unfinished. But a lot of times that's my goal, I to breathing. So I'm like, I get it up. Right, and then get to do it all the way. Yeah, it was a good thing in the lot. Yeah. You know, we can jump it. Same. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. I am the 5'8" one. Oh, it's. That's fast. Actually, one of our employees. We can really.
Some positive social emotional skill you see in the sentence. Where would you rate using your 7 different summary statements?
Seems like he's crushing.
Yeah, he is crushing it. Yes. See, I think they was ready to do all those steps. No. Okay. I'm gonna type an email.
7.
Katie.
I mean, a 6 or a 7, depending on like what, if, you know, like what's happening with his other peers. It doesn't say anything's going on, but like, yeah, he's waiting a turn, is he pushing somebody to getting the water?
Right.
This seems like he'd be a 7 just based on this without kind of observing the rest.
So you agree with Lynn's assessment that he's crushing it? He's crushing it, raise your hands. Do you know how hard it is to get this many people to agree on the same thing? He's.
We're crushing
it. Yeah, I would say he's crushing it too, especially in that social development, like you said, this is a classroom. Play group, some kind of setting, so, you know, he probably is understanding those social norms, right? He's adapting to the routines, he's getting it, so interesting. At least for me, I'm gonna be honest, like I really had to reframe a lot of what I was thinking, but as I was writing that and reading that, I was like, well, that's only taking action to meet needs, right, in my mind, and again, it's a lot more. One sentence is a lot more. Lot we don't know, but enough to say, hey, yeah, he's really understanding this is part of what's going on with school. So thinking about this area, what are some new or different things that you feel like you might be able to recognize or look for when it comes to social emotional relationships? Like, what would you do differently, I guess, is always a decent question. Carrie?
Well, I think looking at, I mean, before, 2011, it was just how's their social emotional, you're kicking it with that, but looking at bringing in some of the other areas and where the social emotional can that play within those routines.
So that's kind of what it makes me think, to just a different way. So looking at, we decided we wanted to extend this eval because we didn't have enough information.
Douglas County, this is new for us, but in Johnson County for, I don't know, as long as I've been here, which is like 25 years, we've always done an eval and decided that day. That was it. And now we extend the eval, right? We might need to go to daycare. We might do the eval at daycare. We might want to go home. So extend the eval is new for us and it's very exciting. Might be old hat for you guys, but we definitely like to gather more information, right? And it's a lot easier now to do that. Now that we know that we can, sometimes that's the first battle, right? Any other aha moments when thinking about, thinking about the kids you're gonna see next week? Laura?
Talking about mobility, that's
Yeah,
they're not being too separate.
who would have thought motor had anything to do with social? I mean, not me. And I did hear Tammy say all this 2 years ago and I still didn't listen to her. But you won't listen to me today and that's, that's okay. It is okay. Yes, ma'am.
Question. So like, when we're thinking of like little ones, I think of like portcullis or something that maybe isn't gonna be, obviously, I think I can think of like them not being able to turn their head is affecting their social and all that stuff. But then some babies like everything looks good, but then like something happens and you're like, okay, but, like you can't go back and change your initial rating, but you're like, okay, this was here, but now this is gone south in other areas. Yes, and so how do we address that?
Yeah, well, the question is like, what if you rate a child? Everything's looking good, but then something happens. And we will talk a little bit about this because if something happening could be a couple different things, right? It could be a diagnosis, right? It could be a progressive kind of diagnosis, which can commonly happen. Or it could be that the child with torticollis gets older and now they're not playing, they're not talking as much. So the cool thing about the data, and if you're a data nerd, and I know there's like 3 of them in this room, Wilcox, Erica, and me, that's it, nobody else cares. The cool thing about the data, when we submit this to the state and the state submits this to the federal government, there are 5 different categories that kids can fall in. And so they are looking at, hey, what was that initial score? Was the exit score the same, right? And if so, that's okay, because between 6 months and 12 months, even if that echo score is the same, that child's showing progress. So you're gonna have, that's one category. Another category is when kids lose skills, right? Some kids pass away, some kids have those progressive regenerative kind of disorders. About 2% of the kids in our state are going to have loss of progress. So it is a very, very small statistical percentage, but it does happen. And what we're looking for in the echo, especially with those, and we'll talk about this, but those yes, no statements, right? Has the child made progress? If that child has learned even one new skill, if they're smiling at their parent, yes, they have made progress. So they may not be doing what is age expected, but has that child showed any gain of any new skills? And if you can answer yes to that, again, you're probably going to rate them at the same, maybe below. Julie and I had a quick email conversation. A child came into our program. She's getting ready to do an annual. She's like, this child has autism. We're seeing the child is regressing. We've seen that regression of skills. We know that happens. It's okay. It's okay to rate a child lower at that annual or lower at the exit if you have seen that regression. It does happen. The answer is always going to be, did the child make progress, even if there was regression? And that's looking at that exit piece, right? So that's a nice part, is like, we're turning in this data, but the federal government isn't analyzing it how we are. They are just pulling it out and pulling it out and pulling it out. So not every kid needs to go from a 4 to a 6. A kid can go from a 4 to a 4. And we know at 18 months to 24 months, that kid still made progress. He's still behind. And again, that's okay. That happens with a lot of our children.
Do they pay attention to what's written in the box at all when they're doing their data collection?
So Chloe knows the answer to this one. No, the answer is no. So the comment box, you guys know how I feel about that comment box. Kansas added that in as a subjective way to gather information. Since 2011, I have never, ever seen any data on what those subjective comments are. You do still have to write something, but write a phrase. Smiles at peers. Walks to mom. Do not write a bunch of stuff because nobody reads those. If you wrote peanut butter and jelly, you guys know I love that one. If you wrote peanut butter and jelly in the box, I would never know you wrote that. Nobody's gonna read it. This is where you say, don't do that, Douglas. Yeah. So again, those boxes are part of it. We have to do it. We don't want to spend a lot of time writing information in the exit echo box on what progress was shown. Write a phrase, 2 to 3 words. Judy.
I also wanted to have your most likely PSP is doing the echo if you're gonna someone, because sometimes with you've been an eval partner and I've gone in as, and you go back and look, you know, the echo when you go, oh, well, I wouldn't have rated that kiddo that way, up or down. So that if even just that we're consistently looking at it more consistently, you know, with the same set of eyes, that will help too. But you know why you justify a quarter.
Right.
Good organ.
Yeah. So, Judy was saying, now that we've switched our process of referrals, and Douglas County may or may not be doing like this, but now that you guys are evaluating and you're taking the child, if you write that IFSP, you will have seen them twice, right? As an evaluate, like if I'm taking a child that Judy and Leslie evaluated and I'm just writing IFSP with mom, I'm not changing that go ratings, because all I'm doing is reading and writing goals. So I'm trusting that they saw the child might not even be there when I'm writing IFSP. So I do think for us, the change, right? And there was lots of reasons that we changed to what the method of taking referrals directly to the team, having the most likely PSP take the child from the very beginning. There's lots of reasons behind the madness of why we do it. And honestly, this is one of them, because I think that for a lot of different reasons, including that, we have got to have the person who's evaluating, treating, measuring that progress, and again, feeling comfortable enough by the time you get to that IFSP, talking about why we picked statement number 4. If I pick statement number 4 and Casey's never seen the kid, she's anxious probably about telling this parent that the child is not functioning at the age expected. But if she's seen the child, she's going to talk to the parent about why. This is what we would expect for an 18-month-old, blah, blah, blah. Your child right now is, blah, blah, blah. So again, you guys are going to have a lot more data, a lot more information to likely make those conversations a little bit more comfortable. Not crazy comfortable, but just a little bit. So outcome number 2, acquisition of use of knowledge and skills, not just cognitive and play. So again, looking at your handy dandy little sheet, I'm not a big fan of sheets, but I actually kind of liked this one. We know that acquiring, using knowledge and skills, again, we know that it's problem solving, we know that it's remembering, we know that it's understanding academic kinds of concepts, symbols, colors, animals, animal sounds, all of that good stuff. But it's a little bit more than that too. So looking through that section on your handy dandy sheet, what are some pieces that may stand out as an example or something new that you hadn't maybe thought of when it came to acquiring and using knowledge and skills?
Showing interest in learning. I never thought about that before.
Showing the interest in learning. I know I was reading that one, Deirdre, and I actually was like exploring environment. Guess what? Motor. Right? If you're a kiddo, how many times do we have those happy sitters, right? They're happy. And they're just sitting there waiting for someone to do something with them and for them, most likely. So showing that interest in learning, figuring out where they are, getting to what they want. It does involve motor.
Just saying, this area is really hard for most, I feel like, because we don't know how much a kid understands. And most parents say they understand everything.
But parents are accurate reporters of their child's development. Yeah, that's a huge thing. We see it at intake conversations, right? Mom is only worried about speech. We get out there and we're worried about motor, sensory, adaptive, speech. So our parents, for the most part, they don't know typical development, but they also don't know atypical. It's why that we have so many families referred to us by doctors, and parents are not our number one referral source. Again, they don't know what they don't know. That's why we need parents as teachers, early head start, our doctors, monitoring, doing your screenings, our child mind team, that's out there constantly helping daycares understand what are we doing, what are we not doing, what do we need to work on. Anything stand out also there for you guys? Something new, maybe something you hadn't thought about?
I feel like for a lot of the OTs and SLPs that do feeding and have kids that either are not eating orally or just don't have any interest in expanding their diet, that I would have never really thought to score them lower because I would have been focused on the third category.
So Isabel was saying for those of us, SLPs, nutritionists, speech therapists, anyone seeing a child with feeding, typically we would have thought that would have been that taking action to meet needs, and there wouldn't have been that piece of using those, using that knowledge, using those skills. So yeah, again, lots of tiny little things that same thing. We just need to do a little bit of a mind shift, I think. So taking our two examples again, Mari and Laszlo. I want you guys as a group to talk through, we're gonna just kind of come back, we'll talk about Mari first and then we'll talk about Laszlo. Talk through like those outcomes with number 2. Where do you think, what are you seeing from Mari? First of all, what are you not seeing? What do you need to fill in the blanks? Same with Laszlo, and then figure out what statement you would wait for each of them as a group, and then we'll come back in about 3 minutes and go through it.
Showing interest in learning, I would say.
Because it's having which to participate, so maybe.
Yeah. Could be desirable. You have more. She just did in that.
It's like.
Cause we think the kids that have a wide. They can use it in everything, even if they can't, like.
Exactly. Especially at that age.
Yeah.
Very good, and she's showing intuition.
And answer the question is like,
Yeah.
Problem solving, climbing and.
yeah. Yeah. Turning that up when it's later. Everything.
And stuff they are.
Like if we're in the same student. With any language, then the vibe. Or depending, right.
Playing.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know what's on the line. So it's very like I would use it. Like how this should be. But to be another struggle. I'm all smart, but they're very good. She did not accurately. Because I'm pretty much super graceful. Yeah. So kid like with friend so they're gonna do it together and 2 babies. I know. So typically I would have I would then have also like the first one on positive social relationships. I would have like even like 8 out of 10. 8 out of 8 is about I would have made her at a 7 rather than actually social relationships because she's too far age, like it's interesting kind of as like 30. I would be right after lunch like but I know that kind of like praying for community. Like that she learns staying up for example because of the mobility issue. And so it's our shy to me would be like the move speaking about like that we're like this RBI like we're going so what's it so where I remember the older kid that I was in it you know, or like, you know, if he would be doing that though for a speech kid, and I'd look at it.
One more minute.
So looking at it differently, hopefully it'll be more active. Having the right man and primary, right?
Or, yeah, all of us now. Be that. All areas, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or very member for the like
Oh, yeah.
like maybe it needs to be yeah maybe we do maybe the rating system
Yeah, that's the problem. You know, I'm provider.
I think this kind of helpful. I got to get have it in our rag folder, so I'm not sure if not looking at. I suppose you think I get that. Actually, and I went.
Oh,
Really.
Any table want to share where they felt, like what skills they noticed that fall into that particular area, how she's using them functionally, and where your table decided to rate Mari? Everybody will know. I hate when this happens. So
She's pretty high still. You got a 5 out of 6. It's just she hasn't any language at all, no sounds. There's that up or read or book or she's not doing any of that. So we were arguing about 5 or 6.
yes.
I say kind of 5 because that's a big component. But they think 6.
Okay.
Just so everyone.
So people is arguing. So there's some repair going on over here. The relationship has to be breakage to repair. So they're talking about all the things that Mari is doing, but she's not saying anything. She's not making any sounds. She's not repeating sounds. So I heard her, heard Sue say 5.5. That's not a rating, it's 5.5. One that might help you guys if you're stuck between two is this particular definition sheet, which literally talks through 6 and 7 are your age appropriate ratings.
Oh,
If you see any delays at all, you're not gonna give a child a 6. So I might argue that if you look at this then to pair along with your decision tree, a 5 seems reasonable. Again, she's got knowledge, right? She's following directions, she's using that point. But communication, maybe she's not saying the animal sound, things like that might rate her a little low. Again, we're doing a lot of hypotheticals here. Anybody else want to share where their table felt Mari might fall?
We said 5.
5? Who said 5? Raise your hand. Nice, we're doing so good. Meredith, where did your table say?
We said 6 because we weren't sure about.
Okay, totally fair, right? I didn't give you guys one in.
We did 4.
So we've been initiating.
we're a tough group right now. Critical.
If you were determined that we're gonna get an A on your report. So the cool thing about ratings, we don't all have to be exactly the same. When we're looking at inter-rater reliability, what we're looking at is, if I would pick a 5, you might pick a 4, 5, or 6. You might be one below, one above, or at the same. That's the inter-rater reliability we're looking for, and I would say we've got it. Now, if one of you guys said a 1, or one of you said a 7, Like then it might be like, okay, let's talk about where you see that as a 1. But the majority of us were, again, 5, 6, 4, totally fine. We're gonna show a lot of progress with this student, one at least. Other thoughts about Mari? All right, let's move on to our hand washer, Laszlo. Where did you guys, which table wants to share out again, some skills you noticed that relate to outcome number 2, some behaviors and where your team would rate Laszlo.
Or give it there, have you lived with Bruce Brown, because we can't go.
If we're gonna explain this to me, right, like if there is like a gross motor delay, that's socially being like things, even though we're talking about it shows.
Yeah, it might not, like they could be 18 months not walking, but they can walk, so they're still like able to.
All right, we'll do Laszlo. Who wants to go with sharing skills, functional behaviors, what maybe? So make eye contact or I'll call on you, Rebecca.
To be like,
it's
not my fault.
Okay, Rebecca's table has a question. Rebecca asked this question, you can stay out of it. If you see any delays, you would not rate them as 6 or 7.
Be a delay, no outcome. Can be a 6 or above.
If you see a delay for that outcome,
But we're combining all the outcomes in our brain.
health development in your brain. Okay, we're gonna end it with that answer next. If you were Meredith Woodring, you would have done this and shift your thumbs down.
In one of the 3 areas, or are you looking for growth in all areas?
Our report card?
Yes.
Yeah.
We particularly need growth and social development and the third. Those are the ones that we are not meeting outcomes on for like 7 years.
Number 2 is good. So 2 are good.
Our report card, is it showing? So they section it out by outcome. And then they're looking at, did the child show progress between entry and exit?
But it's not like all 3 of them, and they showed 4 parts here. If they're looking at breaking it down, social, emotional, retail, and then meeting, action.
With T. Maybe.
Well, we talked
Really
like,
what? Work on the arm. Wrong, the wrong be wet.
I think all the students see the same. Like not every kid has the same grade as another kid, but if a kid has 5 in first one, they're gonna get 5. This element.
If you're really incorporating. Okay, that was Rebecca's question, you guys. I did not relay it correctly. Yeah, if you're seeing delays, again, how is that delay functionally impacting the social development? How is that delay in motor functionally impacting their ability to use their knowledge and skills or taking action to meet needs? So very possibly, yes, there may be kids that we see delays in every area.
I think it might help too if we think about the type of examples that there's like a really specific thing that they have that delay in. So like articulation or just feeding, but like developmentally appropriate in all their other developmental areas. And like if I think about it that way, so like just articulation, for the most part, you know, it's going to impact maybe outcome 1 and 2 more. But 3 is still gonna be a little impacted because they're not being understood or intelligible or something like that. So maybe they're getting a little frustrated and that does affect their social emotional skills. So,
Right. So yeah, so, right, we're gonna have these one-off situations, like a baby with torticollis, like a 2.5-year-old that's just articulation. So again, we're not looking, this is not all kids are doing this. We
Yeah.
still are gonna have these, what we would consider special circumstances. Yeah, and we've got to do those individually.
so we might get some 5s and like 1 and or 3s or 4s and 1 or 2, but maybe like maybe a 6th in the third one.
Yep, absolutely. Heather,
Okay,
were you pretending to be a unicorn or did you?
okay. Maybe, like, so when I do an exit echo, like I will try to look back and so I want to show progress. So say when the people put it in at first, like they gave them like 6s or 7s. But in maybe all the areas, maybe it was an articulation kid. Well, then that child did qualify for the school district, so I'm like, well, so they're still showing a delay, like, I don't feel in good conscience putting a 7, but that's the only way to show progress, so in those situations, I feel.
Right, and we're gonna have this period of time that there's gonna be a little transition, right? We're gonna have a period of time in our program because you didn't do the entry rating on that child, and now we're doing it different, right? So what does that look like? I fully expect our echo scores to look a little wacky, to be honest with you, but I would rather have a wacky year with cleanup on the back end than to keep going down the track of us not addressing this. So totally fine. Again, to make progress, again, sometimes you have to take a step backwards. So do what you need to do, especially for that transition to Part B, keeping in mind Part B is inheriting that echo. It just transfers in a system, you know? So yeah, that's another reason we needed to talk about this too. Yeah.
So I have a point on that. So if she left the rating exact the same, but the child made progress, she can mark yes and put a phrase in there.
Yeah.
If the child's now older.
I always mark yes, it's just more about the number.
You're pretty much always gonna, if you were gonna mark no on an echo, I would just want you to reach out to me before you submit it out.
But can we do that for kiddos that like we lose contact?
So we're gonna talk about loss of contact in a hot minute. We've only got about 18 minutes. So for all intent purposes, we're not gonna do the group activity for using appropriate behaviors to meet needs. But the same thing, think about Mari, think about Laszlo, think about how those sentences, again, they're kind of, development is woven out throughout all of these, and it's supposed to be like that. So again, we know that they're functional, right? We're not looking at isolated skills, we're looking at how this child is using the skills, how are they functioning? What is the child doing in different settings, different caregivers, different situations? How are they accomplishing tasks? How are they participating in the routines? You guys do this all, again, wonderfully. So we talked a little bit about this too. Again, we're not looking at those isolated skills of pointing, we're looking at what is the point for. We're not looking at, is a child saying 2 words? What are those 2 words doing? What's the behavior? What's the accomplishment of using those 2 words? So again, some of this does relate to IFSP outcomes and goals, but for all purposes of what we're doing today, we're literally thinking about that echo page. So, again, this is our why, right? Why are we doing this? We're just recentering. We're, 14 years in of doing it one way, and now we're going to try and do it differently. For people that have done something one way for 14 years, you guys, it's really hard. We want kids to show progress, right? Like we know that they are. And getting the same score on an entry and an exit rating, it doesn't mean that they didn't make progress. It means they're just still behind. That's why they're in special education. That's why they've qualified for Part B special education. They're not developing typically, and that's okay to say. We know that high quality services lead for better outcomes, and unfortunately, gathering data is important, right? None of us went into therapy because we love data, except Erica, me, and Amy. But it is part of what we do, and I know you guys know that. So we're going to talk about 4 steps again, I keep looking at the clock and thinking I have lots of time. We've got, 15 minutes. So we're gonna talk about how we're collecting information. What are we already doing, right? How are we using that information? What are we observing, using that decision tree that maybe some of us didn't even know existed? And then also really looking at those definitions of what the scores mean and where they fall. I really like the second and third bullet points on this, because it gives you guys just a little bit of information about where, are the skills kind of sort of there, or are they really not there? So I would really love to do that. And then obviously we know that we complete the exit or the echo at the entry, annual, and an exit. So these are the things we're already doing, right? We're already doing the APS. We're already doing our record review. We're looking at those NICU discharge reports. We're reading reports from Children's Mercy or Dr. Burns. We're doing the RDI at the evaluation. You guys are talking with the parent. You're talking with the caregivers. You're observing. You may also, some of our SLPs, the OTs, you might be doing other tests. You might be doing the sensory profile, the Goldman Frister. You might be doing a reel. So we can do these other assessment pieces when we're looking at that, but for the most part, we're doing, the first 5 boxes for all intents and purposes. So thinking about, again, when you're thinking about this in particular, this was one of Tammy's slides. I couldn't get the design to change, which is why it's rainbow. But when you're thinking about this, I want you guys to also think about what we often call age-expected skills, right? They're doing what they're supposed to be doing at their age. We talk about emerging skills, those immediate foundational skills. And then we talk about kind of those baseline skills, right? Like those are the skills that younger children are using. So maybe if it's a 24-month-old who's just pointing and has no words, the 24-month-old has foundational skills. If that 24-month-old isn't imitating, if they're not babbling, they don't even have these immediate foundational skills. We're hearing no speech sounds from them. So again, it's reframing, I think, how we're looking at development and really understanding, wow, this child is really far behind. It's, they are not meeting their age expectations, and they don't even have any of those emerging skills either. So thinking about how are we incorporating the ECHO into the IFSP? For Johnson County, again, I think the conversation might get a little easier because you're gonna start seeing the kid at evaluation. You've already met the parent, you've got a report, and then you're reviewing that at the IFSP. Douglas County, you guys might be a little bit ahead of this, but questions to you is how are you guys introducing the ECHO section? What's working really well? Hearing a lot of stuff.
I just tell my parents it's a snapshot so that makes it ease into it a little bit. But also that if they were up there, they wouldn't need us. Like it kind of, and really try to use the word that say, this really reflects the concerns that you share. So it's really basing upon what they said versus, a determination. We found your child, we didn't make.
Right, so Judy's saying, one of the strategies she's using when she's talking with parents is saying this is a snapshot. This is where we see your child based on what you shared with us, based on what we saw last time we were here, based on what we heard from the teachers at daycare. That's a great example. Katie shared with me yesterday, because I knew she had to sneak out and leave early. She actually says to the parent, this is part of what we're required to gather information so we can document how much progress your child is making and what progress they're making. It's okay to say that too. When I did family service coordination, I would just, to be honest, we'd go through the outcomes and all the information and we get to that page. And I would just say, based on the information that I've seen, based on what you've shared, and I would literally just read, Jack, has skills of a younger child. He's functioning around an 18-month-old level. So, we're seeing some emerging development, but he's not there yet. So I would literally just read the box and read the statement. That's actually why Kansas made them qualitative, yeah, instead of it being a 7. So you guys don't have to say your child is a 7. That's what we used to do. That was awkward and weird. Reading a statement, less awkward and weird. So what else is working? And I'm often asked the North team, you guys have been doing the new process for a while. Are you finding it's different sharing the Echo page and Echo information than it was if you didn't do the eval and you inherited a child?
Really got more information already. Other than, this is how the state is done.
Yeah. Yeah, so Leah's saying she feels like she has a little more information at the IFSP to indicate why that child is, you know, where that statement that we've selected.
I feel like
Give an example now.
Ooh, Lori can give an example. How great is that for parents? Yeah, I mean, it's perfect, right? Yeah, they like that.
I was just gonna say, I feel like I explain it more in depth, so parents really know, rather than kind of trying to go through it quickly, if I couldn't back it up with examples.
Yeah, yeah, so, you know, if you're uncomfortable and you're nervous, guess what the parent's gonna do? We're gonna be uncomfortable and nervous, right? If we make a big deal out of the IFSP goal section, guess what? Parents are gonna think it's a big deal. This is no more or less important than any other part of the IFSP, but it is part of it.
Well, then I feel like we can jump from, like, if it's an area that's hard to talk about because maybe they're sport, we give them a free whatever. Then, we can then say, kind of like you were telling me this is your concern, so when we get to the outcome page, we'll make an outcome based on this area. So then you're just backing it up like, oh, we see it, this is where they are, but this is what we're gonna work on first.
Yeah.
It just pulls it up.
I love that, and that leads into the next piece of it is we want families to participate in the Echo ratings, and they are, because we're interviewing them, we're talking with them. So it might not be a direct participation, but in order for the family to help you rate that child, the family has to know typical development and atypical development. So you would have to do a lot of training with that parent before you said, where do you think your child falls? That's an inappropriate question to ask a family. You don't do that. This is information that we have gathered, that we know from our professional backgrounds. And we say to the family, again, based on the information you shared, based on what you showed me, this is where your child is developing. That's our responsibility. It is not a family's responsibility to pick a statement. They don't know development. Thinking about culture. So we talked a little bit about kind of the special circumstances. For time purposes, we won't go a lot into it, but example number 3, thinking about Tanya. She's 16 months old. She's not finger feeding. She's not feeding herself at all because in the family's culture, that's not expected until the child is closer to 3. So when we're looking at those particular situations, we want to take those into consideration. So specifically for Tanya, when we're looking at outcome number 1, the social skills, is she functioning in a way that would be considered age appropriate with the social development? Would she be functioning in a way that would be considered age expected for all settings and situations? So at home, yeah, right? Culturally, her family does not expect her to eat until she's 3. However, she's going to daycare. Guess what daycare expects? Daycare expects her to feed herself at 16 months. So you can have the same child that might be a 7 in one setting, and they might be a 4 in another setting. And how do we reconcile those, right? We've got to look at the big picture. And we do have to take this cultural piece into account because it is important. So anything that specifically you guys want to talk through about that, I mean, all different, and the hardest part about that is you have to know what the cultural expectations are before you can say whether or not it's appropriate. So those are questions we want to ask families. In your culture, when would you expect a child to be potty trained? When would you expect a child to feed themselves? When would you expect a child to drink from a cup instead of a bottle? Those are questions that we need to ask so we know and we aren't just using our own implicit bias to say this child's delayed, but parents wouldn't expect that depending on where they live. 7 minutes. Kind of went through this a little bit already with some of those examples. Again, we've got 7 statements. Like Judy said earlier, it's a snapshot. It's a point in time. And I think telling the families we're going to do this every year is also helpful. We want to, again, look at that specific criteria. We want to take into account where the child is, the settings, who they're with, And then again, that functioning, is it appropriate? What are they doing? Decision tree. So what we're gonna do, at least for the Johnson County peeps, is we will pop this into the Lunch and Learn resource folder. So you guys have these specifically available. You're welcome to use the printed, but if you want to have an electronic copy, you'll be able to have that too. We talked a little bit about exits, right? And I want to get to loss of contact too in these last couple minutes. So again, when you're doing your exit echoes, the most important thing is this last bullet. On an exit echo, even if the child has gained one new functional behavior between entering the program and exiting, you're going to mark yes for progress. Describe it in a short phrase. Do not use long descriptions. Years ago, we had somebody that told me it took her 30 minutes to fill out an exit echo. And I was like, that's too long. So again, we're looking at one functional behavior. Maybe, it's an infant that when we, came into a program, the child wasn't looking at the parent and smiling, and now they are, and they're 3, and they still have delays in multiple areas, significant delays. But we're just looking for one new skill to be able to say, yes, that child has made progress, even if they're still behind. So that's why I said, tell me if you're gonna say no. We'll talk through it. And there were exit echo reasons. We only use 3 of them. Permanent exit is when they're leaving Part C, when they're leaving the state. Local exit is when we have a family that moves to Johnson County, to Douglas County. So we want to exit them from our program locally, and then Douglas County inherits them, and then they go ahead and start services up. And then loss of contact. The tricky part with loss of contact, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, I did not learn this until a couple of years ago. But when we do loss of contact, and these are always the hardest, I think. If you've lost contact with a family for 90 days, go ahead and submit that exit echo. And you're going to mark it for a loss of contact. And you're going to do it from the last time you saw the child, right? That's the best that we can do. We're not asking you to guess what that looked like. You may have to review your CompuClaim notes. You may have to get out your ADPS and think about kind of where they were. But you're going to go ahead and hold that loss of contact until it's time to do something else. If the family contacts us back and we get going, we just delete the loss of contact exit echo, right? It's supposed to be a placeholder. When the child actually exits because they've turned 3, their annual is due, and we, aren't able to write one, we want to go in and change it from loss of contact to permanent exit. This is not something we have been doing because I didn't know we were supposed to do it. Did you know that?
I was talking about.
See, Jessica, sometimes in team meeting, people ask me a question and I'm like, guess I wasn't listening. So I just love that it doesn't happen to just me. So again, loss of contact. So use your last time you saw the child, mark it as a loss of contact, and then when you actually exit from the database, our goal is to remember to go in and change it to permanent exit.
Do we then change? No, then it wouldn't change.
Nope, you leave everything as is, you just change that to the reason. If you want to do it one time in 2025, that will be more than we've ever done it before. That's all we're going for, you guys, 1. First year I became director, we had 1 exit survey, 1. And now we have like hundreds, you guys, it just keeps looking for mistakes. Talked a little bit about answering no to whether or not progress was made. And again, the data is 2% of children show no progress on the 3 outcomes. There are 11,000 children in Kansas that receive Part C. That means 200 of them across the state are literally not making progress. And so yes, it does happen, but it is rare. So think about those children that kind of Angie brought up, right? Like maybe they have a, SMA diagnosis, and we know there's going to be regression of skills. We know sometimes kids with autism regress in their skills, but the question is always, are those kids gaining skills? So yes, they may have regressed in their language, but did they gain skills in other areas? So that's always going to be the piece I think we're going to have to weigh. Loss of contact alone is not enough reason to mark no on this question. So I know what you're gonna ask me. What if I do an IFSP and they never see the kid, right? So here's what I did. You fill out your exit echo, exactly the same scores as your entry. You mark yes for progress, and you write, this is where you might say, don't do this. You write CIFSP in the boxes. That's it. That's all you do. So that's how I've been doing it for 14 years and no one's ever said anything. Those guys. Awesome, project is hard though, right? Like, it's hard to know what to do. I think any questions, at least for Johnson County, ask your team liaison. So again, Nicole, Kelly's not here, we'll be sure to follow up with Amy. A lot, like I said, I just learned this a couple of years ago, so. Through loss of contact, communication delays, discussion points, kids have 7 in all areas, so. This is something I want to just talk about real quick. The answer is yes. Like it might happen. We might have an infant with Down syndrome that enters our program that is literally doing everything we would expect at 1 month of age. And we know that child, again, may not be at a 7 when they exit. That's totally fine. But did they make progress? Yes or no? The answer is going to be yes. OSEP understands those situations and those special circumstances, and that's why they have different ways to aggregate the data. So don't worry about that. Again, not a big deal.
You're saying it's okay in those infants that aren't showing any, like even if the kid that you're pretty sure is gonna have CP because they've had a brain bleed, they're still where they're supposed to be. It's okay to grade them based on what we're observing at that 1 month.
At that one moment, yeah, it's a snapshot, like Judy said, in that moment.
Even though we know that they're probably gonna drop as the discrepancy gets bigger and bigger.
We cannot predict that. We are not Nostradamus. So what is that child doing on that day in that point of time? I know what you want to do, and I want to do it too. So I would say to you, if you look at the definitions, a 6 and a 7 indicate typical development. So can you give a 6 instead of 7? You know, I mean, but in the long run, does it matter? Not really, because that kid, yes or no, is still gonna have progress made. So that's okay.
So they're not only just looking at the number.
Correct.
That's what feels sticky. It feels like an unfair.
Yeah.
Look at how we're making progress.
Yes.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I do not spend this much mental energy on fighting the numbers. I go through it with the family, but it just seems like an unfair assessment of how we do our job. So I'm glad that they do look at the progress made by.
Yes, there's 5 categories of when a child exits or they fall into, and it's based on so many different things. And I looked at the slide and I'm gonna try and explain it, and I don't think I could have because it's complicated. But yes, so it's totally fine. To be honest, what they care about more than anything is if you mark no progress was made. That's a huge red flag, and they're gonna want to know why. And yes, it happens. But call me or call Jessica, don't do it. That one, Casey.
This might be somebody cares, but does the date that we put on there that we do it matter? So let's say we don't have per se a lot of contact, but this kid started the school software evaluation, and I haven't been a month. And so do I use the date from when I last saw them for that, or just the date that I do the exit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you've got a kid who goes to Part B eval and they're there for 3 months and you don't see them. So you're gonna put your exit echo date for their 3rd birthday or the day before their 3rd birthday. The information you're filling out is gonna be from when you saw them last. We don't want you to guess what progress he made or didn't make in those 3 months if you really haven't seen them.
So let's say we aren't ahead and we do the exit echo 3 days after their 3rd birthday. The exit echo date needs to be the day before their 3rd birthday if they don't want to qualify for their birthday, not the day we do the exit echo.
The exit echo date should always match the exit date in the database. And if you've been doing that differently, it's an opportunity to do it.
My question.
We're not, so my kids are eligible, and I always
somewhere, so you need to, like, orderly to probability, or no, we're not getting. Okay, so another question is say my kids who are using American Community Language, they are using it, they have deaf parents, they're deaf kids, their signing is beautiful. We still count that as age expected, if it's not spoken correct.
So you're looking at how that assistive technology, sign language is being used. The same with an AAC device. If they're using an AAC device and they're asking for what they want, and using phrases and all that good stuff, that's appropriate language.
That's also
But what if it, yeah, I was gonna say, but then if that kiddo in daycare is struggling, then would you do it lower because it's not
So in
across all settings?
the next situation, in your functioning same way at daycare, yes, you take the setting into it. So you're gonna probably, the score is gonna be
Find a happy
different. You find a happy medium, but there's no half scores. So, yeah. So, did you wanna?
I just remember, and maybe it's talked about this, as part of those kids with like a known medical history diagnosis. Just based off of other echo trainings that I've done, there was always like a certain box as far as when you're trying to designate where a child is scored. That took into account atypical behaviors, not just delayed behaviors, but something that's atypical, so like a brain bleed, for instance. And I can't remember exactly, but the previous training I've done before where it was an atypical medical or atypical behavior, that would automatically like dock that child down to a certain level. And that might be something that we ask the state, because that's really tricky for some like young kids.
Yeah, so the echo data we talk about, right, we're worried about the echo page, but when we send data to OSAP, we're sending eligibility date, they get whether or not the child's auto eligible, that information pulls in. So they're getting a lot more than just an entry and an exit score, which helps them put these kids in the different category that, we would. Again, not every kid is the same, so they don't look at the data the same. But yeah, the way the form is now, there's no way to indicate yes or no, a child has an auto diagnosis, and debilitating or progressive, anything like that. It's just the scores, but it's also another reason the state OSEP wants us to get a new database, because our database sucks. And that is on tape. Because OSEP needs all this information, we don't have. So it's 9:45, you guys got your whole day left, so thank you for coming. We can talk about this more next week too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. It's so hard to like the babies that fall on adaptation where they're gaining weight and